Episode 1 through 3 of The Wheel of Time Season 3 is out, and today I'm going to give you my spoiler-filled review and recap of Episode 1. Now, we'll talk about what I loved, what I didn't love, and then I'll give the episode a rating. So let's dive into Episode 1 of Season 3 of The Wheel of Time, titled To Race the Shadow. Let's kick things off with a recap of the episode. We start with Liandrin being brought before the Hall of the Tower and exposed as a dark friend through the testimony of Nynaeve Almira. As she's being detained by the Amyrlin, she calls out for aid from other Black Aja sisters in the Hall of the Tower, and they attack. And there's a lot of cutting people in half with the power, smashing their face in with a staff. The result, though, is that Liandrin and the other Black Aja sisters escape the tower with some stolen ter'angreal that were taken by Naomi, a brown sister who was thought to be a friend of Varen that apparently uses compulsion on both Varen and Adelius, although Varen seems to block it. They flee the city after a brief fight with Alana in the streets, in which Alana's warder Ivan is killed by Liandrin. Meanwhile, in trying to track down the other Black Aja sisters, Siuan is with two other sisters walking through the streets of Tar Valon searching, and they're ambushed and killed by Black Aja sisters Amiko and Joya Bayar. Now, as they try to capture the Amyrlin, Moiraine makes an appearance and saves Siuan, and then Siuan incapacitates the Black Aja sisters as Moiraine runs away. Meanwhile, also in Tar Valon, the whole gang, Rand, Mat, Perrin, Nynaeve, Egwene, Elaine, Loial, and even the Aiel, Bane, Chiad, and Aviendha, they are all staying in an inn discussing their next moves. Moiraine wants Rand to leave for Tyr so he can take Kalandor and secure the rule of Tyr. At this point, though, the whole gang wants to stay together. However, both Moiraine and Lanfear don't like this. So Lanfear, who is still trying to stay close to Rand, meets up with Moiraine and proposes that they separate Rand from his friends and that Lanfear will help do it. Now, as Moiraine wants Rand to move, she begrudgingly accepts Lanfear's plan. Rand and the boys head off to enjoy their last day in Tar Valon, and Mat has pictures commissioned of him with the Horn of Valyr as they have a drink at a local pub. Perrin tells Rand that he wants to go home, and Mat is speaking in the Old Tongue without knowing it, and having lapses in his memory due to blowing the Horn of Valyr. Meanwhile, the Amyrlin visits the girls in the city and tells Elaine that she's expected back in the tower. She also convinces Egwene to return through the arches and become an accepted to better help Rand, despite the fact that Egwene wants nothing to do with the White Tower. Now, Egwene goes through the arches, sees visions of herself having to gentle Rand as the Amyrlin, and then leaves the arches having become an accepted. However, rather than staying in the tower, she tells the Amyrlin that she's leaving the tower to go with Rand now that she has the ring. The Aiel are also following because they believe Rand to be their fabled Kara Karn, but Aviendha is really not impressed with him. She confides that in Elaine, with whom she has built a very strong bond, and Elaine tells Aviendha that she needs to give Rand time. Elaine then speaks with Rand and encourages him to lead the Aiel, as if he earns their respect, they will follow him. That evening, they all enjoy one last night in Tar Valon when a series of attacks happen at their inn. Copies of Rand spawn from the mirrors and attack him and Egwene, with Egwene being stabbed a few times before they discover how to defeat them. Perrin's axe comes to life and attacks him and the Aiel and Loial, and also Perrin's ring. But, however, Loial is able to save the Aiel's lives and break the axe. Mat becomes entranced with playing cards that seem to be coming to life when Nynaeve is attacked and stabbed by a Grey Man. It is discovered later that this is the work of Lanfear making good on her promise and the plan with Moiraine to drive the friends apart. For the most part, her plan succeeds. She did not send the Grey Man and realizes that Moghedien is behind that and tells them to leave the city quickly. Nynaeve, who has been unable to channel due to her block, decides to stay in Tar Valon to continue her training. Elaine also stays in Tar Valon along with Mat, who wants to have his memory healed and decides to stay with Nynaeve. Perrin, Loial, and the Aiel head back to the Two Rivers, with the Aiel feeling as though they owe Loial for saving them, and Loial is accompanying Perrin, so they all go. Rand, Lan, Moiraine, Egwene, and Aviendha all head to the Aiel Waste, with Rand deciding at the very last minute against going to Tyr, rather choosing to fulfill the Aiel prophecies and lead the Aiel. The episode ends with Moghedien creating a new Grey Man. So what did I think of this episode? Well, let's start with the performances. Wheel of Time continues to have an amazing ensemble cast. There are very few performances that I wouldn't consider good, so if I don't mention them here, that's not because I think they sucked. But in this episode, we get to see Kate Fleetwood continue to shine as Liandrin. I feel like that's all I did last season was talk about how good she was. was, and she is really good. Her role this episode was a little bit more action-oriented, but she's just still so good in the character. It's hard for me to picture anybody else playing the role of Leandrin better than her, and I would never have thought that I would be entertained by Leandrin on screen after reading the books, but I am, so she's outstanding. I also really enjoyed Sophie Akinato as Swan. Her control and the nuances in the tower were pretty awesome. It was fun to see her in more of an action sequence role and show her strength and the power as she overcame the two Black sisters. I thought that part was really cool. Natasha O'Keeffe, I don't even know what else to say at this point. She is incredible as Lanfear. I was not the biggest Lanfear fan in the books. I'm not Mad Hatch. This portrayal, though, is so believable. She comes across as authentic as well as batshit crazy. I'm all in on it. Natasha is just simply great. I really have not a lot of bad things to say about how they're doing Lanfear in the show. I think another thing that stands out from this episode, something I mentioned in my non-spoiler review of this season, which you should check out by clicking the link up here somewhere, is the improvement in the VFX. The channeling looks great. Even better than last season's channeling. Even the establishing shots of Tar Valon look amazing. So I was really, really impressed with that. You can tell they've upped the budget and they're just doing it a better job of it. I also thought that the episode did a fairly good job of establishing the plotline and tone for the rest of the season. The first episode of a television series has the job of establishing major plot lines that'll run through the season. And I think as a whole, episode 1 really accomplished that and did well. I think also the choice to lead with an action scene was a good decision, and I think it'll hook viewers and spark interest as to what else we might see during the season. There are some very subtle hints and clues about the future that were dropped in this episode. Things I'm not going to go into depth in here, but I think there's some very subtle direction and writing, something that Robert Jordan was actually a master of. There's a lot of foreshadowing, so I thought that was great. That being said, the fact that there is that level of detail actually makes some things I'm about to mention here in a moment even more frustrating, because they're clearly just laziness. It's hard for me to believe they're oversight. But with that very, very blunt segue, let's discuss the things I did not like from episode 1. And I'll preface this by saying that what I'm about to say will sound harsher than I actually feel towards the episode. I'll put these things in like the nitpicking category or the WTF category, not in the OMG, it's garbage category. We'll save that for other episodes. This one is just me nitpicking. But let's jump into my nitpicks. Generally, these fall into two categories. One of them I find far more egregious than the other. The first category is what I would call plot holes of convenience for the writers. This is something that Game of Thrones was very, very guilty of in their final 2 seasons. Overuse of this is what, in my opinion, actually made those final seasons of Game of Thrones so bad. So what are plot holes of convenience? Well, let me give you an example. They wanted Daenerys to rescue the men beyond the wall in season 7. So her dragon and her miraculously traveled the equivalent of more than 2,000 miles in a very, very short window of time. Something that not only wouldn't have been feasible, they just needed it to happen, so they did it. This is common in writing for television, as most viewers won't pay that much attention and they simply just want to be entertained, so it's usually fine in very small doses. It's when it's overused, however, that it can get really dumb. Again, see the final 2 seasons of Game of Thrones. This episode wasn't in the overused category, but there were certainly dumb moments. The largest example that annoyed me in the episode was the fact that they were all in Tar Valon to begin with. Look at this map here of the Westlands. Here is Foam. This is where they ended last season. We know they took a boat all the way back to Tar Valon. They mention it a few times in the episode. Here is the route they would have taken. Notice anything funny about the route? What major city did they pass through that Moiraine is insisting that they head to immediately? Also, Moiraine says in the episode that she won't let any Aes Sedai near Rand, yet she brings them all to the one city on the planet where there are always Aes Sedai walking around, and where the Amyrlin lives that tried to imprison him. Again, the reasons they needed to do it were that they needed the girls back in Tar Valon and they wanted everybody to be together. But that doesn't mean it made sense. Again, it's just a plot hole of convenience, as I said. Additionally, although it looked cool as hell, what was Swan actually doing to Leandrin at the beginning of the episode? Like, I thought she was being arrested, but yet she's like surrounded in a ball of fire up in the air and she's coughing up blood because there's a fire bubble around her. It seemed very showy, like they were showing off the VFX they could do, but lacked any real substance. Again, convenience. So my other issue, which I find to actually be a bigger deal, is the inconsistency in the rules of the story. For example, can men and women see each other's weaves in this story or not? Sometimes in the show, it looks like they clearly can, and then sometimes not at all. And also another one, what can Lanfear actually do with the One Power and not do? The Bubble of Evil stuff in the end doesn't make a lot of sense for a Forsaken to be able to do all of that within the confines of the magic system as we know it. If they could, it would have been lights out for our characters long ago if they can make axes come to life and mirrors pop out. Again, no weaves were seen. As I said, these are nitpicks, but the bubble of evil thing was something the Dark One could do. It doesn't make a ton of sense to have Lanfear do that. But again, nitpicks aside, on the whole, I really enjoyed episode 1. I think it was a solid start to the season, and I think it did an amazing job of exposition to teach the viewer what they need to know to understand the season, and it was simultaneously very entertaining. It's definitely a better start than season 2 had. Now, I'll have more of what I like and what I didn't like in my point-by-point breakdown video that will come out here very soon, where I'm going to go through the episode scene by scene and just point out all the Easter eggs. But what do I give episode 1? Well, I really liked it. It's not my favorite episode, but it's a strong one despite the nitpicks I just gave. I'm going to give episode 1 an 8.5 out of 10. What do you think? What rating would you give the episode? Let me know in the comments of the video. Let me know if I'm a total idiot. Make sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel for more Wheel of Time content. Huge thank you to my patrons for their support. You can become one by checking out the link in the description of the video. And if you like this video, you will probably like one of these here as well. Thank you for watching, and until next time, peace out.